As it says in the Manjushri Namasamgirti, the proclamation or profession of the names of Manjushri, which is one of the most important works in the history of Buddhism, spoken by Buddha Shakyamuni himself. It says, speaking of Manjushri in this case, his words are true and spoken truly. He speaks the truth and his words are consistent. He does exactly what he says he will do. That's again a quote from my translation. So that's the meaning here, that the teacher is teaching what they actually know and what values they actually live up to in their own life. At Vajrayana level, it gets, again, more simple and more complicated because there are samayas that bind or control the teacher's activity, such as the samaya or vow to not give teachings that are unsuitable for a particular student, and conversely, not to withhold teachings that someone is capable of receiving and worthy of receiving. So it works both ways. There are many sources in the Buddhist canon and sutras and shastras that describe what other qualities a teacher should possess, like in the Dode-gen, one of the treasures discovered by Asanga from the Buddha Maitreya, the Sutra Lamkara. There's very detailed descriptions, prescriptions for the qualities of all of these different kinds of teachers or these different roles the teacher plays at different levels, and also for how the student should relate to the teacher, such as the 3 types of service. What are the 3 ways to strengthen your bond, your connection to the teacher so that you can derive the fullest benefit from the teachings offered by that teacher? Well, to support the vision and projects and efforts of that teacher in whatever way you can. To provide material support as well, not just your time, effort, energy, but material support. And most important, to actually try your best to live up to the teachings that you receive, to put them into practice so that you achieve the result, which is exactly what your teacher's purpose or aspiration is in providing you teachings in the first place. Otherwise, what's the point? Just having people wear robes or having people live in monasteries is not the point unless someone is actually realizing these qualities. And whose job is that? That's our job. Again, in the explanation by Tulku Rinpoche on the Mundro preliminary practices in Longchen Yingtik, this topic of how to relate to the teacher, how to serve the teacher, is so important that it stands right alongside the reflections on our precious opportunity, on impermanence, on cause and effect, on the defects of conditioned existence. Right alongside that is the instruction, as a very basic foundational instruction for Dharma, how to properly relate to the teacher. And again, why bother? It's for our own benefit and not anyone else's. So the question yesterday was, how do we know which teacher to choose? Well, let's say you want to get the highest possible research certificate, degree, postgraduate recognition in some arcane field of molecular biology. You'll have studied in that field for many years. You'll know many people by reputation, if not personally. You'll think deeply and carefully about who you want to study with, where it will lead you, what kind of credentials they have, what kind of support their institution provides, and then you'll go and have an interview with them in person and see if you can get along face to face. Then you'll take your time, they'll take their time, and then together, hopefully, you make some kind of decision that this is the direction you want to go. And you'll know you'll have made the most educated, informed decision possible. Do we do that in Dharma, where our whole future existence is at stake, where we are balancing on the line between going in the right direction and the wrong direction in our lives? Do we give it that kind of care and attention with thorough consideration and research and patience? Do we do that? Or do we just go to the teacher who has the biggest reputation, or maybe the most attractive physique, most charming personality, and say, "Oh, I am your disciple, you're so beautiful and wonderful"? Why don't we take it more seriously? And in the end, if we don't take it seriously and it turns out we've made a bad mistake, whose fault is it? Now, by saying that there's a long tradition of how to relate to the teacher and how it serves our own best interests to do so properly, I am not recommending or prescribing that we all have to turn ourselves into some kind of para-Asian traditionalists, that we have to just, simulate the behavioral and cultural practices of people and societies that we are not familiar with. We're really talking about inner attitude of mind and how to reflect that in our words and our actions. The point being that there are time-tested methods for how to train our own minds through relating properly to a teacher, whereby we are not just modeling that relationship upon or recreating in that relationship all the flawed ways we have of relating to people in other areas of our lives. If we treat them as a good friend who then lets us down because they didn't do what they promised, or all of these other models we've developed in our lives through our desire and aversion, ignorance, confusion, and so forth, if we just allow those models for our human relationships to govern how we relate to our teacher, it's not going to go as well as it possibly could. So there are reasons why there are detailed teachings on how to create the right model or framework or context for relating, for forming the relationship and maintaining the relationship between teacher and a student to get the best results that makes everyone happiest. Again, otherwise we're just cheating ourselves. Should I keep going? Let's generalize. Let's say what's bad about Western people in general. Western people in general tend to think of themselves as better than they actually are. Isn't that true? We have one or two good experiences and we ignore all the other places in which we are failing ourselves, and we say, "Oh, I'm making real spiritual progress because I had these experiences." Or, "I'm really smart and I understood this the first time. I know what the nature of mind really is. I have figured it out. I'm ahead of the class." We're brought up that way. We think that way. We take one aspect of our being and we exaggerate its importance, and we neglect so many other things. So we need a personal teacher in our lives because this is how things work. We don't know truly what it is like to be more awake, more wise, and more compassionate than we are right now. We need someone to model that for us, to show us through daily interaction, through exposure, through osmosis, what that is actually like, so that it rubs off on us, so that our eyes are open to being that way, so that we can begin to make ourselves more and more like that. It's a mentoring relationship. And we talked yesterday about what the motivation of that person should be and how it's naturally in their interest. Nothing could please them more than to serving as such a guide and model for us. And why do they do that? They do that not for personal gain, but out of gratitude for what they have received from their teachers, and out of the aspiration to fulfill, again in terms of serving the teacher, to fulfill all the aspiration for beings that their teacher formed. So one of the prayers we often recite is, "May I fulfill all the aspirations of all of the lineage of teachers from Samantabhadra to my own personal teacher." That is my goal in practicing, that is my goal in teaching. So teaching, sharing with others is a natural outgrowth of the gratitude and joy from having received and benefited from Dharma. Okay, we picked on Western people, let's pick on Asians. If generally speaking, Westerners tend to think of themselves as better than they are, Easterners, generally speaking, tend to want others to think of them as better than they actually are. It's not about what they think of themselves, it's about what other people will think of them. Why do I even mention that? Because the key to being a good teacher in Dharma is to teach what you actually know, what you've studied, what you've reflected upon, and especially what you've made at least a serious and sustained effort to integrate into your experience. If you teach beyond yourself, it will either sound hollow or end up having very little benefit. And if a teacher knows perfectly well, probably better than you, what the qualities of a teacher should look like, and they're expert at simulating that, at faking that, and they fool you, even though you've done your best homework and put forward your best intentions, they've managed to fool you, shame on them, not on you. You've done your part. You can't vouch for another person's motivation. You can only do your best. But, having said that, if you ever find yourself, and there's a lot we can talk about here, but in short, if you ever find yourself disappointed, believing that it's not just that you are erroneously, allowing your negative thoughts and impressions to project a more negative image of your teacher out there, such that you need to purify that, you need to examine that. If you ever determine after careful examination that someone has actively and deliberately fooled you about who they are, what values they actually hold in their heart, and you allow that to stop you, then it's shame on you. Because countless people over time have realized the fruits of Dharma. There is a genuine tradition, an unbroken continuity of lineage. There are people authentically practicing and gaining experience and realization today. And as long as you have the pure intention, you will connect with that because, again, that's the interdependence at work. That is the cause and effect of the teacher finding student and student finding teacher. So the fact that something went wrong in one case should not prevent you from continuing on in your path, because it is available and you should continue. If not, you're only harming yourself. For that, you can blame no one but yourself, putting all of the emotions and thoughts and other things you go through aside. So bottom line, you keep going. You just keep going. So now I've really said too much, and I'll stop there and ask for questions.